So he like turned it around. He was like, they wouldn't give me the money, but I'm going to make that money on my own. Hi, I'm Chansey.
And I'm Lila.
And this is for Criming Out Loud.
Welcome back to our pod. Been a minute. We took a break for the holidays. And then, like the super on top of it people that we are, we forgot to post about that. So it's just been radio silence for the past couple weeks. So we're back. We're at it. Give yourselves a nice holiday break and enjoyed it thoroughly. So
it was wonderful. We're sorry to the people that were upset. There was only a few of you, but we apologize. We will announce it next time we take a break.
We'll let the two of you out there know.
Yeah. There's like two people that texted me and were like, why did you not do episodes? And I was like, because it was Christmas and I didn't want to talk about murder that week, I guess. I don't know.
Yep. True. So, and then, we saw each other on Christmas, which was great. And then I didn't see you for New Year's. How was your New Year's?
It was pretty uneventful. It was really snowy. I was up in some rural town in Idaho that I won't name. And it was just lots of snow. But I got to hang out with the fam. So
the
fun.
fam.
The fam.
Do you guys like watch movies or?
I'm trying to remember. I honestly don't think we did literally anything. I think we watched a movie and then we fell down a rabbit hole of old YouTube videos. Does anybody in the world remember Olan Rogers? Do you remember him? The ghost in the stalls guy?
Yes.
If you haven't heard of that, please go look it up. Ghost in the Stalls by Olan Rogers. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
It's hilarious.
His dodgeball story.
It's paintball. His paintball story is gold.
Well, you're right. It is paintball.
Yeah.
It is.
It's the comeback kid. Anyways, on New Year's Eve, we watched like 5 of his videos. And I don't know why, but it was just funny. They're nostalgic. Anyways, go check him out. He's like, the videos are like 15 years old at this point, but still good stuff. That's what I did. How was your New Year's Eve?
Good. Like even more low-key than yours. Wyatt, my husband, just sat there and played Ark, the dinosaur video game.
Yes.
For like hours, and I crocheted. And
that sounds like a great day.
Schitt's Creek was running in the background, and it was wonderful. Super low-key.
Schitt's Creek.
So
so good.
Yep. That was great.
That's great.
Low-key New Year's Eve. Go us.
Yeah. Like not much going on, but it was fun.
Yeah.
It was good.
It was good. Yeah, and then by way of other news surrounding New Year's Eve, I don't know if you've heard about this, but there was like a firework accident in Hawaii.
I did hear about that. Did it was awful. Die?
It killed 3 people.
That's what I didn't know. Like that's horrible.
20 more were like injured. And it was terrible. I was like, oh my gosh, can you even imagine? And there's like, if you, like, I found the story on AP News, and there's like a drone footage that caught the whole thing, and you can see just the fireworks exploding on the ground.
Ugh,
and I was terrible. Like, that is horrifying. I can't.
Were they like illegal fireworks or something?
Yeah.
Or was it like...
so they're illegal fireworks, which I don't know exactly what that means. I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of intense aerials, but yeah, they set off a bunch of them, I think at the same time as what it said, and they knocked over, or maybe it wasn't a bunch of them. I should have like been looking at this article when I said this, but I think what happened was they set off fireworks and somehow they got knocked over and set off a whole group of fireworks that they had off to the side, and those went off.
Okay.
And like exploded. Basically. Is what I gathered from the short article I read. So
dang. Yeah, I heard about that, but I didn't know the details. It's really sad.
And they said that there was like, I think it was all three um, people that were killed were women, and
That's
there's like children that were injured, and yeah. Anyway, so really terrible. So everybody be careful with fireworks.
I mean, yeah, our fam experienced that too. Melted fireworks, started
Yeah,
a house fire in
that
our
caught our
house
house
forever ago.
right on fire. So
Melted the garbage can it was in and burned the entire garage to the ground. So
yeah, yeah,
just be
they're like,
careful.
it's one of those things that like people don't realize like the riskiness of
Yeah, it's
something that like
dangerous.
we just do. Like, it's
Yeah,
something that is not a big deal to us, but it's like them's
that's
is
like
like explosions happening.
those those are explosives, man.
Those are real and not to be toyed with. So anyway, there
Can't
you
just
go.
like go playing around with those. Anyways, be
Cautionary
careful.
tales about fireworks. And yeah, no leeway to the story today. We are talking about a story today. It's a famous kidnapping that took place in 1963, and maybe some of you guys have heard of it. It is the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. So
Wow.
I
Here we go.
heard about this story like last year, and I like thought it was super interesting. So here we are.
Here we
Because who knew that Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped? I did not.
go.
Maybe
Let's
that's
get
common
that.
knowledge. But
I
okay.
wouldn't know.
So we're gonna start with our perp today. And his name is Barry Keenan. And Barry Keenan, at the time of this crime, which takes place in 1963, he was 23 years old. And he was a student at UCLA. And he's actually like, he's a wild guy, honestly. By the time we get into this, it's gonna be like, what? He's a very interesting dude. But he had actually become like a successful businessman by like the age of 21. He was
Wow.
actually like doing pretty well, and he was like known to people as, successful. But all of that changed when he had a car accident, and it left him addicted to painkillers. And I could never really find any details about what exactly his injuries were, but basically he was like in a constant state of physical pain for the rest of his life.
That's terrible. Chronic pain just
So,
seems like the worst thing a person has to live with.
yeah, no, it's terrible. And so it's like, I mean, you almost don't want to blame people like that. They get addicted to painkillers because, like, I think I would be addicted to painkillers if I was just like constantly dying. So, after his car crash that left him forever changed, he became broke and desperate because of his addiction to pain meds, which is typically how these stories go. Like, hate to say it, but when you get addicted to anything, your life becomes harder. So, adding it to this state of chaos in his life, not really chaos, but kind of just rough patch. He was also going through some sort of mental illness, whether that was there his whole life or it started with his addiction. I don't really know, but he said that he like would hear voices. They never actually diagnosed him with anything. The
Hmm.
hearing voices thing makes it sound like schizophrenia. Throughout this whole kidnapping, he like constantly refers to God being involved and
Hmm.
says that he felt like he like divine intervention and that God was telling him he was meant to do this. So whether
Interesting.
that's, I don't know, but he was never diagnosed with anything. So, so yeah, he's in need of some extra cash and he hatches a plan for some quick funds. And he decides that he is going to kidnap the child of a celebrity for ransom money. And in his defense, he says he didn't feel bad about this plan because the second part of his plan was that he was going to invest his money once he stole it, and he was going to once he had enough funds, he was going to pay back the ransom money. So he didn't feel that bad about it because he was just really, in essence, borrowing it for a time.
It was really just a loan, an involuntary
Basically,
loan, but a loan
yeah.
nonetheless.
So, yeah, he's a very interesting guy. So he's like set on his kidnapping plan, and he's like, I'm missing some essential pieces here, though. I've got to figure out who I'm going to kidnap, and I've got to have some help because there's no way I'm going to pull this off on my own. And so the first problem goes away pretty quickly. In his own words, in an interview later, Keenan said, quote, I originally thought of Tony Hope, but Bob Hope had been very active with entertaining the troops and seems like an all-around good guy. Kidnapping Tony didn't seem like a very American thing to do. I decided upon Frank Sinatra Jr. because Frank Sr. was tough and I had friends whose parents were in show business, and I knew Frank always got his way. It wouldn't be morally wrong to put him through a few hours of grief worrying about his son. End quote.
Wouldn't be wrong at all to steal someone's child and tell them that they had to give you
love
money.
it. He's like, so there's like Bob Hope, and he's like a good option, but he's like super entertaining the troops right now. So that feels un-American of me to, take him out of that position. Like,
he's
what?
basically Captain America, and I just don't feel like I could kidnap Captain America's son.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's like, okay.
I am a patriot through and through. So Bob Hope, no way.
Yeah. I don't actually know. I should have looked that up. Who is Bob Hope?
That's going to age us. Everybody's going to be like, are you 4 years old?
This is
Yes,
also the 60s. So
I'm going to Google it right now while we're sitting here talking.
That was a long time ago.
Who is Bob Hope? I'm assuming he's some sort of a singer because he's entertaining the troops.
He's obviously somebody.
He is a comedian and actor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a comedian.
He seems like an all-around good guy, according to Keenan.
What's really funny is that he was born in the UK.
So not that American, Keenan.
He's American, but he's American because he came here, but he's not from America. So that's an interesting
that makes sense so much better.
Twist to his patriotic decision to not kidnap him or his son.
Yeah. So, yeah, basically all in all, he was like, Sinatra's not that good of a dude. I don't feel that bad. He can survive a few, hours of worry. And it was like really interesting because I kind of fell down this rabbit hole when I was doing my research. I saw like this article about Frank Sinatra, and there are like some interesting things about him I never knew that probably lent to this opinion that Keenan had of him. Yeah. So apparently at the time, obviously it's Frank Sinatra, who knows his name. He was super, super famous. Like I did not fully realize until I read these articles how extremely famous he was. But he was like alleged to have paid money to get out of the draft.
That wouldn't shock me.
That was like a super huge scandal because people kind of hated him for it. They're like, "Who are you to like be above that?"
What makes you
but it
so
was
special?
Never proven. So
I'm sure he was just
100% say probably paid them for their silence as well. So,
yeah. I'm rich. That's what makes me special. If you were rich, you would have done the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then the biggest part of my rabbit hole that I was just like, whoa, was like, I did not realize he had connections to like every major mafia that there was.
Oh, yeah.
He was like hanging out with the mobsters, and like he had been tailed for like 40 years of his career by the FBI because they were just like waiting to catch him in some crime.
Doing something illegal.
With the mob. So, and although no charges were like ever brought against him, it was like common knowledge that he just wasn't that great of like a person. So I guess that's where Keenan's coming from. He's like, he's not great. This is a good plan.
I also feel like it's a bad plan to mess with somebody who has mafia connections.
Well, and who's also like that famous. Like,
yeah.
You're going to get
a
lower
level
attention.
Celebrity or something.
who like still has the money but isn't gonna bring like the entire world's attention down on you.
Crashing down on
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
but that was his choice. It was not Bob Hope. So now that he figured out who he was gonna kidnap, he also found some guys that were gonna help him do it. And so he found two dudes. The first was Joe Amsler, and he was like an old high school bud, and he had recently gotten married, and so he was kind of like feeling the pressure for some cash flow. And so he was like, "Yeah, sure, I will help." Sorry, can you ever imagine saying, "Sure, I will help kidnap Frank Sinatra's son"? Sure.
Sure thing. That is no big deal. I have no
Anyway,
qualms.
yep. So he agrees. He's like, "No biggie, I'm in." And then they also rope along Joe's mother's former boyfriend, um, whose name is John Irwin, and he's like 42. So these are like two 23-year-olds. And then there's like this 42-year-old guy that's like, sure, I'm in it for the cash too. Let's do this. Um, and so they set out on their plan. And they first, they actually have like 3 failed attempts at this. So they tried to do it in Phoenix, and then they tried in Los Angeles. And then like it was getting to the end of the year, and they knew at the end of the year that Sinatra Jr. was going to be going to Europe and that they would lose their chance. So then they try again on November 22nd, 1963. But if anybody's a history buff or even just knows this generally, that was the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah.
And it thwarted their plans. So they were unsuccessful a third time.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and finally, on December 8th of 1963, they go in for their final, they knew it was their last attempt, and they succeed. So Sinatra Jr. was staying at Haraz Club Lodge, which was close to Lake Tahoe in Nevada. And at around 9 p.m. that night, Keenan and Amsler knocked on the door of Frank Jr.'s hotel room, pretending to be delivery men. And Frank opens the door, Frank Jr., and him and his friend slash trumpeter, I don't know if that's what you call that, trumpet player, John Foss, they're in there and they're having a chicken dinner before their show. And
Something about that was just so
I know. It was funny because every source like had to say that they were having like chicken for dinner, and I was like, why was that like an important detail in this? That they were like
what's the big
watching
deal?
TV, eating a chicken dinner. I don't
It's
know.
just so 60s, you know?
And also, I'm like, what time are they performing? Because it's 9 p.m. and they're like eating dinner before their show. I'm like, what show are you performing at like 10 or 11 at night? What's happening?
I don't
Okay.
know, man. Showbiz.
Anyway, different time, I guess. So Sinatra Jr. and John Foss, they're having their time, eating their chicken. They get this knock at the door. They let these delivery people in. So they let Keenan and Amsler in. And immediately, once they're inside the hotel room, Keenan draws a gun. And I don't know why, but they pretend like it's a robbery at the beginning. So they're like, get down on the ground, give us your money.
Stick 'em up.
And Foss is like, I have not a thing on me, guys. Sorry. So they get nothing off of him.
This is just chicken dinner. I don't have any cash.
I paid for dinner and I'm flat out. So, and then Sinatra Jr. only had $20. I mean, which is like more than that is now, but still, like you're looking at like
not much of
not
a robbery
that much money.
there.
So, after they rob them for no apparent reason, they bind Foss and Sinatra with duct tape, and they leave Foss behind, but they obviously take Sinatra Jr. with them, and they blindfold him on the way out. Which is interesting. I never could find, like, I was curious this whole time if they were wearing masks or something, which I'm going to assume they were, but I'm like, as delivery people, you can't knock on somebody's door with masks on?
Yeah. They wouldn't let
But
you
then,
in. They'd be
like,
like, what are you doing?
you, like, left somebody behind in the room that now knows what you look like. That they're going to be found because they're supposed to perform in, like, an hour.
Well, just to
So,
be,
obviously,
like, they're
they
desperate
didn't think
here.
this through.
This was a 4th attempt. They just, like, needed it to get
Like, we
done.
got to get this done. I don't care how it happens. Yeah, so, all in all, I don't know. So, but they blindfold him. I guess they didn't want him to know where he was going, even though he already knew what they looked like and whatever. It seemed kind of pointless at that point, but okay. So they get in the car, they start driving, and meanwhile, it takes Foss only a few minutes to get out of his duct tape, and he immediately calls the police, of course, and reports a kidnapping. The police act quickly. Obviously, this is Frank Sinatra's son.
Yeah.
And they started roadblocking and, like, doing a pretty heavy search for Sinatra Jr. And so Kenan, he gets pretty worried. He's starting to, like, see, like, what's happening, and he's like, well, this is happening quicker than we thought. And so he turns to Sinatra Jr. and he's like, I'm pretty sure that this is going to turn into a gunplay situation, and the only way to keep you safe and to get you out of this is if you play along with it and pretend like we're just some buds out having a good time. And so Sinatra Jr. agrees and says, sure, I guess. And at one point, they actually do run into, like, a police roadblock and are questioned by the police. And Sinatra Jr. goes along with it, and they cruise right on by.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Sinatra Jr.
yeah, we're like, okay, these people are idiots, but it's working for them. So they make it 400 miles to their hideout in LA, and at this point, if you haven't noticed, their third person, their co-conspirator, was not with them. So they call Irwin, third man, and they're like, we did it. We have him at the hideout. Get your butt over here. And Irwin's like, I'm on the way, because apparently Irwin was, like, the designated phone caller. He was going to place the ransom call. But it
Wow.
takes him, like, a day to get there, which seems like, again, poor planning. Like, where was he? He's
Also,
throwing a kidnapping. So
why wasn't he waiting for them at the hideout?
I don't know. I really don't understand their plan at all.
Or why
I'm
didn't
like,
one of the
what?
other people just call?
I don't know. I
Weird. Okay.
didn't get those details. So
I'm sure they're not
something got in the
available.
way, I guess. So Irwin meets them at the hideout, and he makes the ransom call to Sinatra Sr. And on December 10th, they get that call at the Mapes Hotel in Reno. And at this point, Frank Sinatra Sr. has already, like, he's already got a team together. He already has Attorney General Robert Kennedy, and he's got his mobster bud. I thought I said mobster for a minute, which a mobster. Sam, and I should have looked up how to pronounce this name. Sam Giancana. It's Italian, and I don't stand a chance. Somebody knows that name, because I'm pretty sure he's a fairly well-known mobster, but I don't know him. So there's the butchering on the pronunciation that I should
Sam
probably
something.
look up. Anyway, so he's got his mobster bud, and he's got the Attorney General, and they're ready for this call. And so when Irwin calls, he demands $240,000 to be dropped off between 2 school buses at some small town in California. And he says, give me that, and then we will release your son. And I was curious in the 60s how much that would have been in, like, today's money. That's like $2.5 million.
Okay, that's pretty hefty ransom.
So it's like, yeah, they're asking for some money. I don't know why, like, 240,000 is like a really specific number.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't round up to 250,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
It's not.
But that's
really interesting.
what they were
It's
asking.
like, do you need that money for something specific?
Is
Are you
that
gonna
like what
pay?
your drugs cost, Keenan? It's
Yeah.
like you need exactly $240,000.
Did you
Okay.
calculate like what a 6 months worth of drugs cost or a year's worth of drugs cost?
They must have just been like being generous. They were like, we don't want to like take him for all he's worth, so we won't ask for 250,000. That's just too much. We'll be generous, 240,000 even.
It's all good.
So early the next day, on December 11th, the money is dropped off where they asked it to be, and Keenan and Amsler, they go to pick it up, and Irwin stays back with Sinatra Jr. until they return with the money, and then they were going to release him. Well, Irwin, he gets super nervous, and he's like, I don't know, this seems wrong, and he releases Sinatra Jr. early. He's like, be free, little bird. I can't handle the pressure. Leave. And
he just broke. He was like, nope, can't do it. It's not gonna happen.
I just like can't even imagine like the disappointment. Like they get back Keenan and Amsler and they're like, where is he? And Irwin's just like, I kind of let him go.
I just felt like it was the right thing to do.
Right. Okay. Lucky for them, it actually didn't super backfire. He was found. So at this point, he had been held hostage for 3 days. And so Sinatra Jr., he was found just wandering the streets a few miles outside of Bel Air. And he was approached by a security guard who drove him home. And that was kind of that. Despite the early release, like, it didn't do much, which it really could have.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he made it home and nothing happened over the next couple days. The FBI, questioned Sinatra Jr. and was like, tell us what you know. What do they look like? And he honestly said he couldn't tell them very much about them. Didn't know much about his captors. Couldn't even really describe them. But lucky for them, Irwin is not a good kidnapper because he decides that he's going to tell his brother what he did. So Irwin tells his brother, and his brother is like, I'm not down with the kidnapping, man. That's illegal. You just kidnapped somebody, and turns them in.
So dumb. So why would somebody tell somebody that?
I know. Irwin, he was not meant to be a criminal. It was not his cut in life. And then they go to trial a short time later, just months later, actually, in February of 1964. So, like, literally 2 months later. It was pretty quick. So during the trial, Keenan actually testified that the crime had just been a PR stunt that was coordinated by the Sinatras themselves. And that story held absolutely no water and was proven false. But for some people, they actually believed that for like years. They thought it was just the Sinatras being the Sinatras. That extra old Frank.
Those Sinatras.
Oh, Frank. So, and then Keenan and Amsler, they do end up being found guilty and sentenced to a pretty severe punishment for a 3-day kidnapping where nobody was harmed. They are actually sentenced to life in prison plus 75 years.
That is really intense.
Which I'm like, not that you should get away with kidnapping, but I have seen murders have a less severe charge.
Oh, yeah.
So, pretty intense. And then, Irwin, who's not quite as involved and definitely not a criminal, he just gets 75 years without the life sentence.
But still, that's a lot of time.
But that's his entire life because he's 42 years old, so he's toast. However, they do a psychiatric observation of them, and they were actually determined to have no criminal malice, and their sentence was reduced to just 25 years.
A lot of time.
I know. I'm like,
I don't condone kidnapping, but like nobody was hurt and it didn't really go off how it was supposed to.
It's not like the last kidnapping that we covered where it was like literally they were going to just kill a bunch of people. Like the Chowchilla bus kidnapping.
Exactly.
Like that deserved time. And not saying that these people didn't deserve time, but like 10 years feels like that's
I don't know.
You're
when I think
a chunk
about
of your
like
time.
Yeah. You lose like a good decade of your life, and hopefully you come out and you don't do stuff like that. That's the point, right? You're supposed to rehabilitate a little bit. But
they like
also,
weren't dangerous.
yeah, like,
So
but it's hard because they had, did they have guns? I feel like you said they had guns.
yeah, like he went in with a gun.
Yeah, that
So
makes
that
it
kind of makes it.
battery, and yeah, that's just
Yeah.
not. I get it, but it's also like it was clear that they never intended to hurt him ever. Like
Yeah, no,
they
I
weren't
don't
gonna
think there
kill
was
him
no, there was no chance that if it went awry, they would have just like dumped him and
and
booked
then
it
ran.
to
Yeah.
Mexico. So anyway, so in the end, however, Amsler and Irwin only served 3.5 years.
Oh, that
I
seems
guess
more.
good behavior. And Keenan served 4.5, and they got out. So I
Okay,
guess
so
somebody had a brain here and was like, maybe not your
life
entire
plus
life.
75 years wasn't quite the right amount. 3 years will do.
Yeah. So lucky for them, they kind of got off with a like slap on the wrist. So when Keenan is released in 1968, he dives into the real estate world, and he's actually like by 1983, he had like a net worth of $17 million.
So he like turned it around. He was like, you know, they wouldn't give me the money, but I'm gonna make
So
that money
I'll
on my
make the
own.
money. Yeah. So prison, like it really didn't do anything for him. He was just fine. And then in 1998, his story made it in print in the New Times Los Angeles, which sparked then an interest in his story. And the following year, in 1999, he was approached and offered $1.5 million to recount his story for a major film. And
Oh.
that didn't fly with Frank Jr. He was like, excuse me, I got
That's
kidnapped.
my story. If you're gonna pay
And
somebody for
so,
it, pay me.
exactly, that's my trauma, and I own that. So he
He's
filed
not
a
wrong.
lawsuit, and he won because there's a law in California that blocks felons from like profiting
Profiting
financially, like off of
from
their
their
crimes,
crimes. Yeah.
which makes sense, obviously.
With all their
So,
serial killers, they'd have to do something about that.
yeah. So he won that lawsuit, but eventually in 2003, the crime was still made into a movie. I just don't think they involved Frank, or not Frank, but Keenan in
Keenan.
it. And so they still made it into a movie. It's called Stealing Sinatra. And
How catchy.
yeah,
Some
I didn't watch
alliteration
the
in that
movie,
title.
but yeah. They just a few years ago, actually, they were supposed to make another movie about this called Operation Blue Eyes. That was like in 2020, and I didn't ever hear anything. Like I saw that there was like an announcement about it on
And then
the
it never happened.
interwebs, and then nothing ever came of it. So
Oh, that's a bummer.
maybe it's still in the works. Who knows? Unlikely 5 years later, but
Probably not.
crazy. 5 years. It's 2025. That just like hit me. Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Sorry.
Same. I was like, no,
Sorry.
it's
It's
not.
just
It's
like
2024.
5 years
I was like,
after
oh.
2020. I'm like, what? Okay. So then last bit of like interesting news that happened with this case is that in 2021, John Stamos actually hosted a podcast through Wondery where he interviewed Keenan about his experience with this. And I didn't have time to listen to this 8-episode podcast series. So if you're curious about this story and you want to hear like firsthand perspective from Keenan, it's called The Grand Scheme, Snatching Sinatra. And you can hear John Stamos interview him about it, which was like really random. I didn't
Super
like
random.
know that John Stamos like did podcasts
I didn't
about
either.
this especially. I was like, why? But okay.
Cool
So
beans.
anyway, so that happened, and throughout the process of making that, Barry Keenan and John Stamos actually became really good friends. So much so that on November 13th, 2022, Keenan, he actually committed suicide, but he sent
Oh.
like a letter to John Stamos, almost like a suicide note, which I guess you had to be really good friends to do that, because I don't think he
Guess.
did that for very many people, so they were tight. And then John Stamos like posted about his death on Instagram, and this is what he said, quote, "Dear John, by the time you receive this letter, I will have committed suicide. That was the heading of a letter I received from Barry Keenan, the mastermind behind the 1963 kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. and the subject of my recent podcast, Snatching Sinatra. Barry shot himself Sunday night. He was 82. He was in a tremendous amount of physical pain. He's free now. I have spent many years with Barry working on bringing his colorful yet troubling story to light, and I will continue. Barry was motivated by a deep compulsion to help people. His mental illness made it difficult for him to see that his methods weren't always appropriate. In the case of the Sinatra kidnapping, they were dangerous and illegal. But his intentions were always sincere. That was the Barry I knew. He worked hard to shine a light on mental health and addiction, helping thousands not suffer the way he did. As I spoke about in the pod, all Barry wanted was a seat at the big table. His friends were rich and famous, and he wanted the same thing. He just went about it the wrong way. He did his time and cleaned up his act, but never quite made it. Maybe now, wherever he is, he's sitting pretty at the big table with a white Russian in one hand and a Cuban cigar in the other. But Barry, if you see Sinatra Sr. at that table, run. He's still pissed at you. God bless you, Barry. May your guardian angels, or the committee, as you called them, protect you and keep you safe. Your pal, John."
Wild.
Yeah. So there you go. I guess, yeah. I guess he was an all right guy at the end of the day. That's definitely what John Stamos thinks. So,
all right. I mean,
it's an interesting case because it kind of makes you like feel like maybe even though he kidnapped somebody, he wasn't the worst person, even though he had to have been a pretty bad person to have ever thought about kidnapping somebody.
Yeah, it's a weird paradox because he doesn't give me the same like evil vibes as a lot of the people we cover.
No,
you know?
It's like
but
he actually
definitely did some bad stuff.
Good intentions, but like just super off.
Just he really missed the mark, like by a mile.
Yeah, and like Keenan, he outlived Sinatra Jr. because he died at the age of 72 in 2016. Keenan was 82 and died in 2022. So kind of crazy.
Weird.
Yeah.
That is weird.
There you go.
That's a weird story.
There you go. Story of Frank Sinatra Jr. and his kidnapping.
Crazy.
Start the new year off with that one.
I kind of expected Frank Sinatra Sr. to like take out a hit on Barry.
I know.
Or something.
You would think.
Get revenge.
You think it would have just like irked him. But maybe it would have been too obvious. You know, like if there was like a weird and timely death, everybody would have been like, oh, Frank did it. He killed him.
That's true. But and then the FBI could actually arrest him because he'd be involved in something illegal.
Yeah. So there you go. Tip of the week. Don't ever kidnap somebody, ever, ever, ever. But if you do it like Barry Keenan. Don't hurt anybody. Get a short sentence. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get out and live a wealthy, successful life sitting on $17 million. I'm just kidding. Just don't kidnap anybody.
It's like, actually, tip of the week, just don't ever, ever, just ever kidnap anybody.
That is all.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, have a good week, everybody. Stay frosty.
Stay frosty.